Hello there and welcome to this video. I'm going to look at a game from the 8th round of the Tata Steel Masters 2021. We're in the 8th round. I haven't been focusing much on this tournament, but I was intending to focus on it during the end of it. We're in the 8th round and we have 13 rounds, 14 players, all play all. And this one, Andrey Esipenko from Russia, the 18-year-old, and he's facing the world champion Magnus Carlsen. Now Magnus started off by beating Alireza in the first round, took some chances and it paid off, but since then he has only managed to draw against his opponents. Some of them rated under 2700, so he needs to find his form. He's not far behind, and usually when he's playing these tournaments he tends to have a good run at the end of the tournament. So let's see if he can reproduce that. He has the black pieces and he plays the Sicilian. Pawn to c5. And that signals that he wants to fight and try to get something going against his, less experienced opponent, but promising player nonetheless, Andrey Esipenko. d4, cd, open Sicilian, knight to f6, attacking the pawn, defending it, and now a6. So the invention of Najdorf, well, he popularized it. And the idea is one of the early ideas is to play e5 and not have to worry about anything landing on b5, bishop b5 check. And in some lines we could play knight f5 following bishop b5 check. So a6 prevents a check on b5, and now bishop e2 by Esipenko. Now black has a choice. He can play e5 or play e6. e6 more of a Scheveningen type of pawn structure. That's what this is called. If you don't play a6, if you go back, this would be the Scheveningen. Well, I just say Scheveningen. I'm not going to attempt the correct pronunciation. And yeah, this used to be more popular, but then white has the so-called Keres attack, which is quite dangerous, and this was played in the matches between Kasparov and Karpov. So e6, and this does allow white, after these moves, to play g4. A threatening move, but it doesn't seem like black should have to worry about much still. He plays b5, white pushes, knight f to d7. And yeah, white now needs to worry about b4 at some stage, and also the pawn on g5 is hanging. But Esipenko does not care about the pawn. He plays a3. And this has been played a few times. I found some games, some correspondence games. So definitely an interesting idea. Magnus takes the pawn and queen d2. Now Magnus took on e3, which I believe is a novelty. I saw one correspondence game where black played the bishop back to f6, and that game was drawn. But in both cases, after this, white has given up the pawn, but he is arguing that, okay, you kind of have to castle kingside, and then I would very much like to use the open g file to attack. Maybe we'll castle and bring the other rook to g1, use the rook on h1 here to maybe help some h4 push. So white is hoping to get attacking play. Also, we should mention Magnus now played queen h4. We should mention that white has a lot of pieces out, so he's leading in development. Okay, queen h4. At the moment he's stopping f4, but maybe it shows the position is not easy to play. Because one would think black would try to finish development here. So queen h4, not sure what this move is all about. Rook to g1. Now hitting the vulnerable pawn here. Magnus simply pushes it forward, and now queenside castles. Again, black has to catch up in development. He has no time to take such a pawn. White will simply, attack the queen, and the queen risks getting trapped. And also, you just fall too far behind the development. Even if I couldn't trap the queen, I'm playing f4, maybe f5 trying to open things up, and it's very dangerous. So Magnus now retreats. So this makes me question the queen h4 move a little bit more. Queen h4, now back to e7. So white is gaining a lot of time here. f4, bishop e7. And now white plays king b1. He's leading significantly in development, and usually one tries to catch your opponent when he's behind the development, but white plays the move king b1. Now, this is a common move in the Sicilian, just to get the king safe. Avoid any funny business on the diagonal, avoid any funny business on the c-file. So kind of an early prophylactic move. But it's strange that white feels that he has time to do this, but this actually contains a trap, and Magnus falls for it. It turns out the computer thinks the position is already difficult for black. He has to play a move such as knight c5. But the move Magnus played, knight c6, allows a very nice shot here by Esipenko. Knight on c takes on b5. Now what is this all about? Well, Magnus took, not much else to do. If you ignore it, say, okay, you got me. The position is just so bad, I'm going to win this pawn. I'm up a pawn, I have a lovely knight, and we have this attack. So, all the position for white. We can't do this. So what happens? He took the knight. And does he take on b5, intending to take this? No, he takes on c6. What's the idea? Loose pieces drop off. We're down a piece, but what can we do? Queen to c3, correct. Hit the rook, hit the bishop. We win the piece back, and we won our pawn back. What's more, after castles, queen takes c6. Black is left with just too many weak pawns. You can't protect this pawn, it's going to drop. b5 is also very weak. And white has better pieces. I mean, the rooks are on half open files. Bishop seems stronger than the knight that's struggling to find a foothold in the center. So Magnus tries to stir things up here with d5. E takes on d5 and rook f8, trying to get play for his rooks. But a nice in-between move by Esipenko, d6. Keeps the pawn, and this pawn becomes a big thorn in black's position. Magnus retreated the queen, but note that we can't really deal with this pawn. There's a pressure on the knight, this pawn is going to drop, and then the bishop would help the pawn to promote, so this is just out of the question. So queen d8, and queen takes b5. Starting to cash in. Up 2 pawns now. Rook cb8. And here Esipenko decides to give one of the pawns back, queen c4. He could have played queen d3 to defend the pawn, but I guess he felt he didn't need to. And he allowed Magnus to take. So rook takes a3, but now queen to c7. Again, you can't take, and well, Magnus is down material, so he kind of has to keep the queens on, and he does. And now a nice maneuver by Esipenko, rook g5. This rook now gets into the game via the 5th rank. Very, very nice chess. Rook a4 and rook a5. Note that Esipenko could have gone wrong here with bishop to b5, which looks tempting, hitting this and hitting this. But black will play rook takes b5 and then get on the a file, and all of a sudden white is actually in trouble here. But Esipenko avoided this, and he contested the a file with rook to a5. Again, this nice maneuver, stopping, well, the only counterplay that Magnus kind of had, rook a to b4. Now if you take the pawn, now we can play bishop b5, and this is just deadly. So Magnus tries to get some play with rook a to b4. b3 by Esipenko. Queen retreats. The rook is hit on a5, but okay, it is protected by the queen. So Magnus plays bishop f3, hitting black's rook. But now the rook is under attack here. But queen c7. Again, Magnus must avoid the trade. He plays queen to f6. And now rook a8 by Esipenko. Note that there wasn't time to take this, because then black would get counterplay. Take this, takes, and rook takes, and the queen comes in. So Esipenko, once again, not allowing the counterplay, plays rook a8. And now this simply doesn't work, because this rook is pinned to the king. So we have a trade. And queen f5. Still trying to set up tricks. But Esipenko is having none of it. He plays king b2. Obviously, if you take the knight, there's rook takes b3, utilizing the pin. And yeah, black would save the game. But simply king b2. Calm chess. Rook b5. And, well, what to do really? If you move the knight, I simply push the pawn. And there was also simply the threat of queen c8 and queen back to c3, maybe picking up the rook. So it's all falling apart here for the world champion. Trying to get counterplay on the c-pawn, but simply rook c1 defending. And after queen takes f4, queen e8, Czechoslovakia, king g7, d7, and Magnus resigned. And we have a truly historic win by the Russian Esipenko. So I wore my Russian shirt in honor of Esipenko's win here. A truly historic one. I believe that since Magnus became world champion, Esipenko, 18 years old, is the youngest to win against Magnus Carlsen. Other interesting stats: Magnus has lost only 6 times in Tata Steel in the A group. And this is his first loss since 2017. In 51 games, he won 16 and drew 35. This is his first loss with Wijk since 2012. And his first loss versus a player rated under 2700 since 2015. So a truly historic and, well, smashing victory by the Russian Andrey Esipenko. If you haven't heard of him, he was already making headlines at 15. And I have a video here which you can check out where he gave one of the best mates you'll ever see against Sergei Karyakin at the World Rapid Championship. To check that one out as well. But yeah, what a win by Esipenko. The chess world is shocked, and yeah, so am I. Anyway, please do like the video. Appreciate your time, and I'll see you later in another chess video. Thank you.